Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed. Should be
Thank
on
you for having me
and
again.
should be, it's recording. Okay, great. So I think the last time we spoke was about last September, October, something like that, like about 9 months ago, a little while before the election, I remember.
Mhm.
And so Biden won. And now we have a situation where hopefully coming out of a pandemic, we'll see with the Delta variation. And do you think Biden is, some people are saying predictably, he's broke all his campaign promises, which is predictable, totally predictable. But some people are saying he's breaking with neoliberalism. Do you think that's true, or do you think Tariq Ali said that? I find that a little hard to believe, but supposedly has a I think it's $20 trillion budget plan, construction plan over a 10-year period, something like that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think I did see something about Tariq Ali saying something positive about Biden early on, but this is fantasy land. Biden, to no one's surprise, as you say, he just ignored, forget broke, his campaign promises. Remember all the debate and discussion about what kind of public option he was going to give or not give, or who was going to be eligible for Medicare and all the stuff he said. And Julian Castro said, "You can't even remember what you said 5 minutes ago."
Yeah.
And he doesn't. He's just, nothing's happening on that front.
Right.
I mean, I don't. Everybody knows what Biden is. I mean, and he's worse than he is, because he's worse than he was. I mean, the Democratic Party spent the entire election year destroying and attack, and their allied media, MSNBC, CNN, destroying and attacking and breaking down the most popular and most necessary social program you could have, Medicare for all, single payer, universal health care.
Right.
That was something that all of these Democratic politicians had said, "Oh yeah, I'm for that, I'm for that, I'm for that." And they spent the entire primary year, the single strongest element of the campaign was to denigrate that and say, it's not possible, it's not possible, it's not possible. Right. Biden was a terrible candidate. Everybody knew it. Kamala Harris was worse. And they did it just to cut off Bernie, to cut off what that represented, which was some kind of break with neoliberalism, some kind of weak tea social democracy of any kind. Right. And they've got him. So Biden comes into power. Forget all the campaign promises. He's no new FDR. To no one's surprise except deluded Democrats. He does exactly the same thing that Trump does. He attacks Syria in February, on a phony pretense. He attacks them again now. What you see here in every sense, last week was a good example. You had a continuity. You see the continuity of government, really. Biden attacked Syria again.
Right.
And the news came out that the key witness against Julian Assange was a psychopathic child abuser.
Right.
And acknowledged that he lied about it. The
right.
Biden administration was the one that decided to go ahead with an appeal against the judgment against extradition of Assange. They decided to do that. So what you saw there, these are two kind of illustrative moments in both cases. Trump came in, I want to end these wars. I want to end the war in Syria. Couldn't end the war in Syria. American troops have to stay in Syria. They're occupying a third of the country. There's no reason for that has anything to do with what they're saying. Biden comes in, and Trump administration was the one that took the case against Julian Assange that the Obama administration didn't, because they got this phony witness to say something that was supposedly a crime that Julian Assange was supposed to have done, which he didn't, it turns out. But so Biden comes in and he could say, oh, it wasn't Barack and I didn't bring this case against Julian Assange. That was the Trump and the nasty orange man. We're not gonna pursue this this case. We're gonna drop not go for an appeal. He could have said that. He could have said Trump was the one who did a phony attack against Syria. Trump is the one who left the troops in Syria to take the oil. We're not going to continue that policy. He continues it. Okay. So what you're seeing here is the continuity of government. Trump was a weak president. Biden is a weaker president.
Right.
And he's going to continue the policies. The infrastructure plan is a shadow of what it should be.
Right.
There should be, it's not just infrastructure plan's a good thing, but it's going to depend on public-private investment, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be end up being a boondoggle for private contractors. And all the social programs that are absolutely necessary, housing, medical care, guaranteed jobs and income. These are things that are absolutely necessary. The working class has been devastated by this year of the pandemic, and billionaires have made out like bandits, like the bandits they are, and nothing is being done about this. So I don't know what anybody means if they say that Joe Biden is ending neoliberalism.
Right. That's interesting. Biden, it's pretty apparent that he's not all there. Who's really running the show? Who's running the executive branch? What group of people do you think are?
I guess it's Klain and Blinken, but
Right.
one of the things I'm saying is you see with Biden and with Trump, that whatever they said they wanted to do, there is a deep state, and it persists and it gets the things done it wants to be done, okay? And it prevents the things that it doesn't want to be done. Prevented Medicare for all. It gets us into Syria and keeps us there. And whatever Trump wanted to do, whatever Biden says he's going to do, Biden, as you say, is kind of at this point a nullity. So you've got people like Blinken and Klain, I guess, running the show. Harris, apparently, even the Biden people are saying she's a disaster. So
Yeah.
she's a non-entity too. She's a nullity. But so you have a deep state, and what people have to realize, look at the JCPOA, the Iran deal, for example. Again, this is something the Obama administration, Barack and I did this deal. Joe Biden could say, we're going right back into it. But the deep state, everybody has to realize there is a deeply embedded Zionist lobby within the deep state. They are pushing for war with Iran and for confrontation with Iran. That's what this is about. It's not about stopping nuclear bombs, because the JCPOA was a very effective mechanism for that. Anyway, it insofar as anybody thought Iran was one of the nuclear weapons, which it wasn't and didn't. But they're not going to just go back to what they negotiated. He's so proud of negotiating. They're going to try and get more concessions from Iran, and Iran isn't going to do it. And that's because there are people within the deep state, the permanent government, who are pushing and pushing and pushing and have been pushing for years for confrontation with Iran, and they're going to try and make sure they get it. And people are kidding themselves about what all this is about. Not going to get out of Syria. The Zionist lobby wants a confrontation with Iran. They want American troops in Syria, and that's why they're there. It's not something that's impossible to understand, or it's a mistake, or incredible, or stupid, or people making mistakes, they're incompetent. There are forces that want this to happen, and that's why it's happening. And there are forces that don't want social democratic programs in the country. They didn't want single-payer Medicare, the health insurance industries. What's happening with this pandemic is because of the pharmaceutical industries. You don't understand this, then you don't understand anything. This is really, and I don't see anybody confronting this in a necessary and serious way. I mean, there's a debate about Democrats versus Republicans, or Biden or versus Trump. I mean, we're just heading in a path of disaster that's, on the international front, we're heading for more confrontation. Russia, the Russian policy. I mean, what are they doing? They're sending warships to deliberately provoke the Russians.
Right.
The British didn't do that. We're talking about the British destroyer that went into the Black Sea and deliberately, and it was demonstrated, it was irrefutable. They made a decision to deliberately enter the territorial waters, Russian territorial waters, and provoke the Russian response. And the British didn't do that without sign off from the Americans. This is craziness, but they're not going to, what's going to happen in Ukraine and Iran and Syria? They're not giving up on any of these things. They're pushing forward with confrontation. Right. So it's hard for me to see, and people are going to have health care? Are people going to have, the Trump administration introduced into legislation, I just found out about this, they got away with this. They stuck it in a bill, allowing the government to, without the citizens permission, take people off of Medicare and put them in Medicare Advantage programs.
Okay.
And so they're not only are they not going to make anything better, they're going to make it worse.
Right.
And it's just terrible. And the fights that we have are fights about silly and irrelevant things that, have nothing to do with anything.
Right. It's interesting looking at Biden's anti-terrorism bill. It's ostensibly against white supremacists, but there's a section, the fine print is really against the left. Anyone who's anti-capitalist, anti-system, really. It's a little disturbing. And liberals love it. Liberals are eating it up. Liberals are just eating it up. Like AOC is pushing for more internet censorship, which is pretty disturbing. What's your take?
Liberals have become authoritarians in a very serious way. That stuff, that anti-domestic violence, domestic violent extremist bill. I mean, anybody who's anti-capitalist or against, who's an ecologist, who's concerned with the environment, overly concerned about the environment. I mean, they're out to enforce the Overton window from the right and the left. They're going to go after right-wing extremists, that's for sure, what they identify as right-wing extremists, and they're going to go after what they call left-wing extremists. But they're defining it so broadly, and this is an extension of the anti-terrorism stuff. It's fear-mongering. They're using January 6th to do this, to create a fear-mongering atmosphere where you have to go after anybody who challenges the legitimacy of an election, or who challenges the legitimacy of the government, or who doesn't agree with what the intelligence agencies say. And they're prepared to do that. And the worst of it is the media, the so-called Democratic allied media, MSNBC, CNN, they go along with this. Joy Reid gets up and talks about how great the generals are and how we can't insult our generals. AOC goes, we have to censor the internet. The Julian Assange case. This is a crucial element for freedom of the press and freedom of speech in the world. And the Squad and Bernie can't get themselves to say a word about it. They're going along with it. And it's a case that now, since that last week's revelation about that witness, if there were progressive media and if there were progressive politicians, they could push this publicly and force the Biden administration to a very difficult position. And they're not. They're going along with it and getting on television and saying, I give Biden an A.
Right. He's the most progressive president since FDR. They're pushing that one. That's interesting. Have you been following some of the YouTube drama with Aaron Mate and TYT? That was Jimmy Dore, all that stuff.
Oh my God, I can't believe you're going to ask me about that.
It's entertaining anyway.
It is. It's
media, supposedly independent media, is covering for U.S. imperialism. So I think it's good in a way. It's exposing like TYT.
Yes, look, Aaron Mate is a great journalist. His work on Russiagate, I mean, he's just impeccable, and he destroys the people who think they can get away with crap with him.
Right.
They can't. And I like Jimmy Dore. He's funny. He's frank. He's right. The force the vote thing was a perfectly good idea.
Yeah.
That was entirely within the realm of American electoral party politics. It was exactly what AOC ran on and said we had to do, and they just punked out on it. And I definitely I have followed it, and I think Jimmy Dore is very invested in this personally because he knows these people, he's friends with them, so he feels a lot of betrayal, and that comes through in his passion and his anger. But I don't blame him, and I think he's right. He and Aaron Mate, I mean, what that last business, I mean, when Cenk and Anna Kasparian said Aaron Mate's being paid by the Russians and he's in the pocket of the dictators, that was phony, that was nasty, and just vicious. It's just McCarthyism of the worst kind. They don't respond to the serious policy differences. So I do agree with Jimmy and Dore and Aramate on this. And they have certainly revealed what I think is because Cenk Uygur was very good. I mean, he was fired from MSNBC. And he had a great story about being brought into the president's office and told the Obama administration, the White House doesn't like what you're doing. He says, too bad. He was very good. So I think that, he's got to say something about, I never really watched TYT. It wasn't.
Right.
But, he did take $20 million from Jeffrey Katzenberg. He has all these people on his board, not just Katzenberg, but other people.
Yeah.
And, I just can't believe that's not steering the way he covers things. And he's become an adjunct to MSNBC. That show has.
Pretty much, yeah.
And, Jimmy Dore is passionate and angry sometimes, but I think rightfully so. And I like him. And Aaron Matei is cool as a cucumber.
He's really,
very precise, very meticulous. You can't fault him in that way, any way, shape, or form. I'm more on the Jimmy Dore hot side, but so, and I think it's instructive to see what's happening. I hate seeing it absorb too much energy, but it is important to know that this is what's going on. That the kinds of moves that TYT made, this kind of McCarthyite, he works for the Russians. That's just not good. This little passive aggressive Me Tooism, send you a note. I have this little incident that I could use against you, and if you don't shut up, I'll use it against you. That's nasty crap, and it's good. George did a very smart thing by saying, "Hey, listen, this is what look at the DM that Anna Kasparian just sent me." That cut it off at the pass, and especially with the history of TYT and all their Howard Stern wannabeism, it's really. But I'm glad that people see that, but what it shows you is how hard it is to maintain independence. I mean, you got to not care.
Yeah.
You can't take $20 million from Jeffrey Katzenberg and put all the bankers and pals on the board and think you're independent of the ruling class.
That's an effect, yeah. And let me say, independent media, independent YouTube channels are being demonetized now. There's really a crackdown on it. And the YouTube and Facebook censorship is getting more and more extreme. A little disturbing. Also, notice people on the left, particularly like really strong anti-imperialists, are often being labeled as red, brown, or suspicion that they're fascist. Caitlin Johnstone or Jimmy Dore, Max Blumenthal, a little fascist. They're red, brown. I mean, it's kind of destructive narrative. Anyone who makes liberals feel uncomfortable or the Democratic Party feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, they're very intent on going after anybody who's critical of the liberal democratic narrative and saying therefore they're right wing. Because look, they agree with the right wing on this, or they agree with this right winger on this, that, or the other thing. So therefore they're right wing, and they're really crypto fascists, or it's terrible. We have a situation, the words right and left have lost their what I would consider a pointed political meaning, accurate political meaning in the country. The Democratic Party and the liberal democratic media political establishment have nothing to do with the left. They are the enemies of the left. They are the most effective enemies of the left. The Democratic Party and Democratic allied media is the most effective block to any kind of left social democratic, let alone socialist program. That's what they're there for. That's what their purpose is, and they do it well. And they have nothing to do with the left. I don't have any more respect or any, people are like, well, so-and-so voted for Trump. Well, you think that's any better than voting for Biden? Really, I'm telling you, I don't think it's any better.
Yeah, I think
this is at this point, the idea that there's some kind of implicit that, Democrats are good, Republicans are bad, Democrats may not be as good as we want. No. They are, the Democratic Party, we saw this. You saw it play out over a year. As I said, they made their program, the party and the media and all of the Twitter sphere and blogger sphere, and they made their program blocking and destroying the most basic, simplest social democratic demands ever.
Yeah.
Universal healthcare, single-payer healthcare. There's nothing radical or revolutionary about this. And that was their program, to block that from happening, to block anything from the left. Their program wasn't to defeat the right. They come into power and they work with the right. They are the right. The Democratic Party is a right-wing party.
It's a right-wing party, yeah. In fact, Biden's military budget is, I believe, $15 billion more than Trump's, which is, it's insane. And of course, well, when Trump was in power, the Dems gave him everything he wanted, basically.
Yeah. They do that. They say we can't help it because he's in power. Then when they're in power, we can't help it because we got to go along with the Republicans. We can't exercise our power. And but this is really, there are deep, structural elements of the American polity that have to be changed. And the Democrats don't do that. The Senate, the filibuster, they can change the filibuster.
Yeah.
That has to go. The Senate itself is an anti-democratic institution.
Right.
The electoral process in this country is terrible up and down the line. It's not that Republicans didn't make it bad. It's been bad for, everybody saw this blatantly from the year 2000. We've had at least probably twice in 2000 and 2004. No, in 2000 and 2016, we had minority presidents. Most by 3 million votes, you win. That's crazy. The Republicans didn't make that. They preserve that. They're Democrats and Republicans want to preserve all the undemocratic factors of the American polity because it helps them manage. They can then manage things the way they want. They're anti-democratic parties, both of them. And the American polity is structured in a way deliberately, and done so deliberately by the founders, to be anti-democratic and to block democracy and to manage democracy in the most narrow way possible. And it does it very well. But then you're going to have this argument that Donald Trump was destroying democracy, or Republicans are destroying democracy, and if we don't vote Democrat, the democracy is going to be destroyed. What are you talking about? What democracy? It's gone. It's an oligarchy, and they both like it that way.
Yeah. They were. Oh, yeah, by the way, I have a little trouble hearing you. Wonder if you could speak slightly louder.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, good.
Right.
Yeah, I remember the late Trump administration. There were periodic coup scares. So many people were worried. Liberals were almost terrified that Trump was going to pull a coup. He never had military backing. He never had institutional backing. He'd shoot off his mouth. I mean, yeah, he was a buffoon. But if so many people were terrified, he went to pull. Oh, by the way, the plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. The guy who was in charge turned out to be an FBI informant who was paid $30,000 for doing that. I mean, the FBI did this stuff during the Bush administration all the time, set up these entrapment operations, alienated Muslim kids or leftist kids. They ruined people's lives. And I suspect they were doing the same thing then with the kidnapping plot.
Yeah, that's what they did, not only in Bush, but during the Obama administration also. That's what they do. They set up these plots to bust them up and show how they're protecting us. Yeah. And anybody who doesn't think that could have happened in any circumstance, you always have to be suspicious of that. And they're going now, they are, and they just like they used Islamic terrorism, they're using right-wing, white nationalist terrorism as an alibi to start repressing everybody and to accrue more power to themselves that they're going to use against everybody. And so this is what's going to happen. They're going to present these terrible right-wing plots and that they've cooked up themselves. They've helped to cook up anyway. And they're going to use that. But in the meantime, 6 months down the road, or at the same time, they're going to be going after left-wing groups and left-wing. And everybody say, well, you can't do that. Anybody knows this is what's going to happen. I have to be fooled not to see how this is going to work out. They want to control the Overton window of thought and the Overton window of political action. That's why, and the ruling class in its most powerful elements is entirely behind this, okay? And what Trump represented to them, and the apotheosis of that was January 6th, was someone who was unreliable. And the Democrats in 2004 Barbara Boxer came into the Senate on January 6th and said, I'm voting against this. We shouldn't count these back. The election has been stolen, probably was stolen in 2004 from John Kerry. So on January 6, 2005, Boxer came in, I'm going to vote against this. She had the backing of left-wing activists. People demonstrated that Ohio was probably stolen. So, but she limited herself to making a speech on a suspended floor.
Yeah, right. Didn't go anywhere.
Trump brought 10,000 people to Washington to storm the Capitol. Yeah. That's the sin. You know, I'd like to see Bernie Sanders bring 10,000 people to Washington to storm the Capitol for Medicare for all, because that's the only way it's going to happen. That's the only way it's going to happen. And that's what they want to prevent. And that's why Trump can be canceled, ruled out, anathematized, thrown off social media, because he was stupid enough to go he was the bull in the china shop that actually broke some china. You know, everybody else pretends to be. Bernie pretended to be Mr. Revolution, but he was never going to bring 10,000 people to the Capitol and say, and Trump did not say, let's go storm the Capitol. So let's put that, but Bernie wouldn't bring 10,000 people to the Capitol and let them storm the Capitol, or, you know, but we have to realize that's the problem. They don't want people to be energized against the ruling class and against the elite. Right. And Trump, for all kinds of stupid reasons, did that, or was willing to do that. Not in a very effective way. He couldn't have taken over anything. As you say, he had no backing from any powerful element of the ruling class, of the military, of the political establishment. He couldn't have done an insurrection or a coup or anything like that. It was all narcissistic theater. And they know that. But they're worried that someone's going to come along who could get support. I mean, they do everything. They're cutting that off very early on in the. I mean, Medicare for all, like Bernie Sanders, and he's demonstrating what a weak tea he is, you know. But he's the threat. Yeah,
and he just collapsed just like that. He didn't put up a fight.
There's always someone who he buys the political paradigm of the Republicans versus the Democrats, and we're stuck in this political paradigm. And within this political paradigm, we have to protect the Democrats against the Republicans.
Yeah.
You have these fascist monsters that are, you know, and that's a political judgment, you know. That's not just weakness. That's a political judgment that the important distinction, there is an important distinction and a fundamental distinction that has to be defended between the Democrats and the Republicans. And the Republicans are some kinds of monstrous fascism that the Democrats represent, some kind of weak tea liberalism that wants to do the right thing but is a little stupid about it, and blah, 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 blah. And that's all just nonsense. It's all nonsense. Yeah. And what is the program of the right-wing Republicans, of the right wing of the ruling class, that they need that they need a fascist takeover of the country? They're getting everything they want.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't need the fascist takeover of the country. They don't need a white nationalist takeover of the country. They don't need it. There's no program there that's that much different from the Democrats. So the idea that there's some kind of threat out there, you know, there are groups of people in the country, there always have been, and Donald Trump did give them some visibility. You know, we're going to march around, but they don't have any ability to do it. And there's no faction of the ruling class, strong faction of the ruling class, that wants to see the institutions of American polity and American power upended and transformed at all. They were getting along fine with the way it's working, you know? So they want to make sure that nobody comes along who wants to see any radical change in the institutions of the country, right or left. And they're going to front for everybody. They're going to front the right wings, guys who want to do that, guys and gals, and they're going to say, look, we got to protect you against them. We got to protect you against them. But meantime, these institutions are what's killing you.
Right. Where do you see change coming from, if there will be any change, any possibility? Definitely not the Democratic Party.
Not going to come from the Democrats. It's not going to come right now. I think we can see it's not going to come from the so-called progressives within the Democratic Party. You know, they've bought the Kool-Aid. I don't know. I think it's going to, you know, unfortunately, it's going to come from populist movements in the streets And left political actors of any kind have to start being a pole of attraction on a populist level, and leading movements in the street, trying to lead movements, humbly saying, we're here to help you get your health care, and this is what you need, and we want to do this for you. If you go out to people who are dissatisfied and say, first I got to find out, are you a racist? First I got to find out, do you want to let all the immigrants in? First I got to find out. Or you go out and you say, I want you to have a job. I want you to have health care. What can we do about that? How can we fight for that? What's the best? You think this guy's going to get that for you? You think that guy's going to get that for you? You got to start with solidarity based on material conditions and on material struggles, and with some respect for the idea that people can have different ideas in their heads that are stupid or reactionary or whatever, but it's their social position in the social economy that gives them, that makes you want to have solidarity with them, and you've got to be able to talk to them and move them in a certain way. And leftists are losing the ability to do that, and they get bogged, they get sucked into the debates and the paradigms that the establishment sets up, whether it's on populist movements in the streets, or whether it's on COVID panic, or whether it's on whatever. They get sucked into that, and they think, oh, we have to take this. Anyone who doesn't agree with this position is a right-wing fascist. Yeah, and that's just a disaster. It's a disaster.
Yeah. Like, did you read I've been following Glenn Greenwald, and Jonathan Cook wrote a really good article defending him. I mean, if you read that article, I thought it was really good. Greenwald brings up a lot of really good points, I think. How narratives are being controlled. The liberal narrative is deeply authoritarian in some ways. There's some buzz about what they call the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, and Klaus Schwab. Do you think this may show a view into what the ruling class is contemplating or thinking about it, or do you think it's overhyped?
I'm not terribly familiar with that. I know the Klaus Schwab thing and the Great Reset. My position on that right now is that Klaus Schwab, first of all, this is about capitalism, and this is where the right wing gets, goes off the rails completely.
Seriously, right wing, yeah.
I'm not going to use the term conspiracy theory, but they have a theory of this, which is this is communism. Klaus Schwab is somehow in league with the Chinese Communist Party to make the world communist. Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, whatever they want to do, it's a reset of capitalism for the sake of capitalism. Okay. Right. Now, and we have to look at that. And I think people like Schwab and Bill Gates they have this capitalist techno utopia dystopia idea that they're going to reinvent the world in a way that runs on kind of technocratic marvels. And I just saw this thing on Twitter, and it was at Google. Two people from Google who were talking about, look at this pill. You take the pill and you swallow the pill, and your whole body becomes I don't know exactly what it was, but I would say electrically charged, but charged in a way that it authenticates things for you. So they're proposing, and they have it. They made it. This is not science fiction. These people from Google saying, we got this pill. And when you take it, then you can just log into your phone and you can open the door because you're authenticated automatically by your body. So, this kind of stuff, there are people out there who think this is greatest thing since sliced bread and all of this, but this is a way, of course, these are technologies that are technologies for of surveillance and control that are terribly powerful, and we should be really suspicious about them. Now, I think a lot of those things are going to run into problems and actually getting into, they're not going to create a techno utopian capitalism that's going to avoid all the problems with technological and DNA. But, I'll say this, what's happened with the COVID paradigm and with the pandemic paradigm is terrible. And it's phony. I mean, it's phony in the sense that, you have this virus, but they constructed a way of dealing with it that made it impossible to know what the truth was about it.
Yeah.
They promoted a narrative about it. They excluded anybody who said anything outside the narrative, anybody who suggested anything outside the narrative.
Right.
You mean this drug might help you treat? No, you can't talk about. We're gonna ban that drug.
Yeah.
Okay. And all of that. The single most important and concrete and real result of that, because I saw the pharmaceutical company saw the opportunity from the beginning. They're the ones who control the FDA and the CDC. Bill Gates, capitalist pharmaceutical. And if leftists don't understand this, that the pharmaceutical industry is to the FDA and the CDC what the arms manufacturers are to the Pentagon. And that the Pentagon is not out there to defend democracy and to defend your country. It's there to promote imperialism, and the arms industry is going to get what it wants. And the FDA and the CDC are not there. They're not science. They are the captured regulatory agencies of the pharmaceutical industry. Mm-hmm. And the pharmaceuticals industry saw in this virus the opportunity to create a situation which would allow them to promote mass mandatory adult vaccination. And that is the result of this, not Schwab and the Great Reset. It's not going to be a kind of worldwide utopia, but you're going to have, everybody's got to get vaccinated, or they want to leave their house or go across the street or go to another state or get on an airplane or get on a bus. That's what you're going to have. Right. And that is terrible. And people on the left think that's science demanding that. It is not science demanding that. And that was prepared for by and the debate about this and the discussion about this has been anti-scientific. It is destroying the possibility of scientific thought and process about this. It is very dangerous. And you saw what happened with the lab leak hypothesis, where for a year it was anybody who thinks that is out of their minds, they're crazy, they're anti-scientific, they're conspiracy theorists. Suddenly, somebody puts out an article, and Nicholas Wade's article is very good on this, which is a very persuasive article, and now they're going to take it seriously. And of course, the right wing, you see, it's the Chinese Communist Party. This was an American Chinese, Fauci, and they funded this. So this is not, but for a year you couldn't talk about it. It was excluded. You were crazy to talk about it. So this is what has been going on with vaccines for decades. You can't talk about it. Challenge a vaccine program. Oh, you're out of your mind, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're anti-vaxxer, you're a moron, blah, you're a right-winger. So now that the left has got that in their mind. So now and the pharmaceutical company prepared that very well. The editors of the BMJ and the British Medical Journal and the Lancet, at least one of them, wrote about it, that the pharmaceutical companies control the research. They have done a very good job of this. They control the ideological apparatus and they control the research. Swine flu vaccine came out in 1976. I think 50 people died or something. So we'd take that off the market.
Yeah.
600 adverse events taken off the market. Yeah. These vaccines come out, 600 people die, 6,000, 11,000 adverse events. Coincidence. Yeah, everybody's got to get vaccinated. Let's give it to the kids now.
Yeah, they want to give it to kids, which is...
Give it to the kids. Pregnant women. Now, pregnant women. There are people getting miscarriages. There are people... These are vaccines. These are drugs. They're drugs like any other drug. They were not about... They deliberately excluded unhealthy people. They excluded children. They excluded pregnant women from the trials to get results which were 95% relative risk reduction, but only 1% absolute risk reduction. Nobody tells you that. You're going to see what that means. I can't explain all that, but I'm just saying that the ability to discuss these things and to look critically and skeptically at these things has been destroyed. And the left is too much. They think this means I'm scientific and rational as opposed to it's exactly the same thing. But this was prepared for decades about vaccines. and it was a method about the scientific discussion of vaccines has got to be within these parameters. And if it's not, then it's not scientific, then it's morons, then it's right-wingers. And that has been, the apotheosis of that now has been through this. If ivermectin works, you can't have if there's any treatment that works,
Right.
you can't have an emergency use authorization for the vaccines that allows them to be used before they're licensed. That's why they attacked every drug that was mentioned as a possible treatment for starting with hydroxychloroquine. They can't say Trump invented ivermectin, because he didn't. They worried about ivermectin, but it's out there. And it's a drug that's had very good results. And frontline doctors who use this, they ignored all the clinical doctors who came and said, this drug works, this has benefits. These are not panaceas, but they have benefits. And instead, what you got was, shut up. You're a doctor. Yeah, 6 months ago, you were one of the greatest virologists in the world. But now you're saying that, we're going to shut you up, demonetize, take you off of YouTube. I mean, they took the Senate testimony off of YouTube.
Right.
Of, I think, Pierre Corey, the guy who's an advocate about ivermectin. His public Senate testimony, they took that off YouTube. That's nuts. And if people don't see that that's nuts and anti-scientific and demolishing the very basis of the scientific process, this is the problem. If you don't see that, we're in a big jam.
Yeah, it's like scientism, not science, not science.
That's the way of putting it. That's a good way of putting it.
I have a friend of mine in a neighboring state who developed cardiac congestion from the Moderna virus, and this person is in their like late 20s, like 26, 27, got cardiac, and now is waiting on the waiting list for a heart transplant.
Now,
yeah, I don't know. Every vaccine, a certain percentage, it's tiny percentage will, but these vaccines, it's off the charts from what I'm hearing. I don't know if there's reliable statistics.
Well, the problem is it's hard to get the truth about this.
Yeah.
Because one of the things they do with the vaccines, and have always done, is there are different evidentiary standards. If someone has a heart attack or myocardial, 2 days after they take the vaccine, that's a coincidence. Right. Someone dies 3 weeks after they get a positive PCR test for COVID, that's a COVID death. They die from a gunshot wound after having a private. If there's positive information about a vaccine, it's treated as if it's dispositive, conclusory. This creates they give you the impression that that positive information is a definite certainty that the vaccines are great. If there's a negative consequence to a vaccine that seems to be there, we can't say anything about that. That's a coincidence. Correlation is not causality, blah, 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 blah. They do not treat the evidence in the same way. They do not have the same standards of evidence. One of the things I hate, and a lot of people do this in a lot of ways, is evidence-free. This is an evidence-free assertion. Most of the time people say that. No, it's not an evidence-free. What they're doing is and they do this with vaccines all the time, and they do it with other things too. If it's not proof, then it's not evidence. If you're saying something which tends to a conclusion that you don't like, the vaccine might be dangerous, then unless you have proof, you don't have evidence. That's not the way science works. Right. Science works as we build up evidence. We look at the evidence here, we look at the evidence there. You don't have proof right away. And sometimes you never have proof. Sometimes you just have to make a judgment based on the best evidence available. So this is a phony dismissal of things. Oh, the fact that all these people got, 5 times as many people would normally get myocarditis within a week after the vaccine got it. That doesn't mean it could be a coincidence. You don't have any proof.
Right.
That's not proof. You don't have any evidence. I'm sorry. That's not evidence. That's evidence that you have to look at. Evidence is something that you begin an investigation with. That's part of an investigation. But if Pfizer has a trial of 1,000 people, that's proof. That without pregnant women and without kids and without unhealthy people, then it's proof that you can put it out in the healthy. You can put it out to the pregnant women and healthy. I mean, so this idea that on the one side of things, evidence that's non-conclusory is treated as if it's conclusory and establishing certainty and a fact, and on the other side of things, evidence that's non-conclusory but persuasive is to be dismissed because it's not proof. It's not, therefore it's not evidence. And that's a very, very dangerous thing. People don't see how anti-scientific that is. There's nothing more dangerous. This is the most dangerous thing. Of course, there are even things that are immediately more dangerous. There's the danger of war, which is more dangerous in the short run. But this is this undermines everything. And it really does. We're creating a situation where people are, and leftists are believing that the idea that you have health and the idea that you deal with viruses is you have part of the population that's fully vaccinated, and therefore they're fully protected against viruses, and therefore they can go out and do everything right. And you have another part of and they're bubble boys and girls, and the other part of the population has to be bubble boys and girls. They have to sit at home and never go out, never breathe on anybody, and never get close to anybody. That is nuts. And it's not the way to defeat viruses. It's the way to lose the war against viruses. That's been known for 100 years, and they're just dismissing it and ignoring it and going on the wrong direction and preventing people from even discussing it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Not a lot on YouTube. It's it's interesting. That's sad. Well, yeah, like
I rant on that.
Yeah. Country like India, which was facing catastrophe, they are using ivermectin in some states, not every state, but the states that used it have shown good results. States which didn't use it did not show good results.
It's just impossible. It's hard for me to know and trust all the data about this.
Yeah.
You see the results of cases getting worse after vaccination. But then again, the definition of cases has changed. That's crazy what they did with defining cases and defining deaths. They just changed the definition of everything. And therefore, it's retrospectively even impossible to know what was actually true. A positive PCR test is not a case of COVID. And yet it was treated as if it were. And that's the basis of everything. We have 600,000 people that have COVID. Well, no, you had 600,000 people who died after having a positive PCR test. But they didn't necessarily die of COVID. And people just ignore this. I went to high school, the same high school as Anthony Fauci did.
Okay.
He was some years ahead of me in high school. So I've had Zoom meetings with my high school classmates, and Tony Fauci, the great, it was so wonderful. Tony's one of our.
Yeah, we're in the same class.
No. He was ahead of me a few years. Not as old as Fauci, but still, it's a small, kind of a unique high school.
Okay.
Jesuit school in New York City.
Was that the school that Norman Finkelstein went to?
No.
He went to some school with a lot of famous.
With the dark side stuff.
Okay.
In New York City, it's the premier school in the parochial, premier high school in the parochial system.
Okay.
It's a very good high school. It's one of the best high schools in the country, frankly. Right. It's people who take a special test to get in and blah blah. It's also a scholarship school, which is very interesting because not everybody goes there for rich. But anyway, but I'm just saying, there's a worship of Fauci that's been done, and now you see Fauci's a bullshitter. I know exactly why he's Jesuitly trained. He spins what he wants to spin, and he's part of it. He's the medical bureaucrat who's been around for 30 years in the medical bureaucracy, which is captured by the pharmaceutical industry. And he wouldn't have been there for 30 years if he weren't willing to play along with that. And so, I don't know, but anyway, so that's, what I'm saying is there's just a mindset, but among,
right.
It's very important to be respectful of science. People forget. I wrote an article about this during the Ebola crisis. Ebola. This is, what I'm saying is COVID, the official statistics of COVID, even with people dying of clear alternate causes, like self-harm, suicide, were, for anybody under 50, there's less than a 1% chance of dying of COVID. I mean, this is not, so, but remember the Ebola crisis, 2014 or so. This is a 50 to 60% case fatality rate. This is a horrible disease. When there were two people, and there was a case in the United States, but two people came back from Sierra Leone or Liberia where there was a doctor and a nurse, and there were Chris Christie said they should go into quarantine for 2 weeks because they might bring Ebola back. And the Democrats, I have it all. I started writing this article. Chris Hayes was, how could you do this? You're destroying our freedoms, going against the rights of these people. For 2 people, they want to put 2 people in quarantine for 2 weeks. Doctor and nurse, great for them. They should be rewarded. They should be absolutely, anybody who has to go into quarantine should be guaranteed, their job, their security, etc. But the Democrats were like, these Republicans are just taking away our freedoms because they don't like these people, because they're Democrats for some reason. They fuck the nurse and the doctor were Democrats, and we can't put them, we have to put them in, for this was for, so they arrest themselves in Thailand. This is for a disease. 2 people who had been exposed to a massive viral load of Ebola, you can't quarantine them. But for a year, you can quarantine the entire country over a disease that has for most people, less than 1% fatality rate, infection fatality rate. And anybody who questions that is an idiot and a moron.
Right. And they use that as a cover for a fantastic transfer of wealth upwards.
Absolutely.
The CARES Act and other stuff. And
this has been a year in which the working class has been destroyed.
Yeah.
And the ruling class has benefited. But the left will defend policies that you can't have a lockdown unless you have income guarantees. You can't call something a pandemic that has everybody locked unless you have Medicare, universal single payer coverage. If you're going to go along with that, what the hell is that? That's crazy. You're going along with destroying society without any concern about putting in real social measures. If you're really worried about health, you got to have universal health care. Right. Nobody's talking about it. It was disappeared from the conversation.
Yeah, totally.
I just, this is, and what's going to happen here, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, is DeSantis in Florida, Texas, the right-wing governors who opened up quickly and didn't have everybody dropping dead, and people are out in the streets and they're getting their jobs back. Florida, the unemployment is better. The working class didn't suffer as much from people want to get back to work and they want to have kids back in school. Kids can't go to school, they wear masks, they're going to be 6 feet away. This is nuts. Children, this is nuts. And the politicians who are in front of saying, let's go back to school, let's go back to work, get your job back, well, they're going to benefit politically from this.
Yeah.
And it's, people will again be saying, oh, that's because everybody's so stupid. They go along with these people. They're going to benefit politically from this. The only people who could get away with being locked down inside were people who had some comfort, some backup money, a job that you could do by over Zoom.
Right.
That wasn't the working class. They had to go to work and they had to be both exposed to the virus, but they also didn't go to work because they were thrown out of their jobs. And it's the way you deal with these things is not the way that it was dealt with, and it was stupid and terrible, and it wasn't effective. And what can I say? If you look at the curves of every country, they're all pretty much the same. Sweden did better than the United States and Britain. They did not do nothing. They did something. You protect the most vulnerable, and you let the other people live their lives. You gotta get the viruses in. Herd immunity is not given just or primarily even from vaccines. And this is the way the human race has worked with vaccines for years. And you've got to let the immune system of humanity confront and deal with the vaccine. Children have good natural adaptive or natural immunity to this vaccine. You got to let it. I mean, you really do let it to the virus, rather.
Yeah.
You've got it. That's the way you develop herd immunity. The immune system confronts the virus.
Yeah.
You confront the version of the virus that's in the vaccine. You're not confronting the natural version of the virus, and it'll work. It might work, but might do something else, and it changes your immune system in a way that might make you more susceptible to viruses like it. So the next round, another coronavirus, the Delta variant or this variant or that variant, people are going to get sicker. And they're going to say, oh, see, we need more vaccines. Maybe because they took the vaccine. This is a known phenomenon, antibody dependency enhancement. Because they took it might be. You have to investigate these things. You have to be able to talk about these things.
Yeah.
This is science.
Resistant strains, but yeah. Then we got like a $1,400 bailout, and they very grudgingly gave us that. Just other countries, Canada, I believe, gives their citizens what $2,000 a month or something like that. Other countries,
most countries gave, most developed Western countries gave about $2,000 a month. My son lives in Canada. They got a monthly stipend for a long time, and they got job guarantees. And besides, they're living on a social base of healthcare. You go to the doctor. You don't pay for tens of thousands of dollars to go to the doctor for anything, and they're living on a social base of other social programs that are there. Housing.
Uh-huh.
You can't have. What's going to happen when people start getting it? People are already being affected. And this is the point. People should be out in the streets rioting. I mean, they should be storming the Capitol. And it's not going to change until something like that happens. You got to understand if you don't see this now, the strategy of the progressive Democrats and Bernie Sanders and AOC to work through the institution, to hobnob and persuade their colleagues and the Democrats mostly to go along with some basic little thing for this year. And then when are you going to get universal health care for people? How many more years? 10, 20, 30? What are you, out of your mind? Yeah. People should be furious about this. And the Democrat, anybody who calls themselves a progressive, let alone a social democrat or a socialist, should be encouraging people to be angry about this and to express that anger. And really, the struggle for universal health care is by any means necessary. You're not going to get Congress is in the pocket of the health insurance and pharmaceutical companies. They are not ever going, deep state entirely. They're not ever, the presidency, they're not going to allow a president to come in and listen. They're not going to change that unless you make it, threaten them with something worse. To make universal health care in this country, you have to do away with the private health insurance industry, which is an enormously profitable industry. The private health insurance and pharmaceutical companies contribute more to politicians than finance does. It's the most corrupt industries in the country. And the capitalist class in this country, in the social democratic countries where this happened, it happened because there was a threat of socialism. So they had to give some social policies, okay, to make a deal that, all right, we'll surrender the capitalist social health insurance industry or pharmaceutical industry or medical care industry in order to keep social peace and not have the working class get real full power. Right. And unless you threaten something that's worse, unless you drive them under their desks, unless they think you're not going to get universal single-payer healthcare. One demand, one policy that is standard in most other cases. And in fact, we're in those other countries now, they're trying to reverse it because the threat of the post-capitalist societies has gone away, they think. So, this is what, from my point of view, I'd like to see something that looks like it understands that.
Yeah.
And looks like it's willing to tell that to people. But what they want to tell people is support AOCs. Let's primary this Democrat. Let's get someone in there who's going to. There's no path to single payer universal health care. One thing through the committees in the Congress.
Right. AOC couldn't even fight Pelosi with the. Anyway, okay. One more question. How do you see the rivalry between the U.S. and China shaping up?
Well, I think the Americans are scared now of China. China's becoming a powerful country, and will be soon the most powerful country in the world. Not because they're not going to have as big a military as the United States. The United States has an enormous military, but of course it can't win anything. It just lost the war in Afghanistan against the Taliban. They don't have an air force. They don't have. It lost the war. 20 years they fought. They lost it. Okay, because politics is in command, to quote Mao. Okay, and what the Chinese. And I'm confused as a Marxist at how to characterize China, because they clearly are certainly incorporating capitalism and capitalists within their social framework.
Yeah.
But it's not a simple capitalist country at all.
Yeah.
It's playing the capitalist game in a this is the game that heroic, peaceful capitalism is supposed to play. We're not coming to your country to tell you how to live. We're not coming to the country to work to change your. We just want to make fair deals with you. And the Chinese are going around the world building things. The Americans are going around the world threatening everybody and blowing things up and sanction. The only way they get people to do that was sanction them.
Right.
Because there are other elements being presented. I mean, I can't stress enough how dangerous America's commitment to Zionism is, and how that's pushing them into wars in the Middle East that are world wars, that are threatening world war, and that's something that people have to be aware of. None of these supposedly incomprehensible wars are incomprehensible. That's what they're about, and it's still there. But the Americans, they're protecting a certain form of elite rule that if there's a political movement against it, let alone a revolution, they're going to side with the elite in Venezuela or in Bolivia or in Brazil. They're going to side with the elite, and they're going to be there. America is an anti-democratic force in the world. Chinese do business. They come in, they build things. They're there to sell their goods. They're there to build their industries, but they're not coming in threatening people. They're not saying, if you don't do what I want, I'm going to attack you or sanction you. Or we're just going to offer you a deal. And they get good deals. And they have this Belt Road Initiative. Now, the United States wants to do their alternate infrastructure plan. It's going to be too little too late. And it's going to be based on, Russia, you've got to let Navalny out of prison, or we're going to sanction you. All of these things are going to be based on the United States does not want to give up its primacy in the world. And it's going to fight like hell against that. The Chinese don't yet have primacy in the world, but they're getting there, and they have a path to get there that is not warmongering and not sanctioning, threatening everybody. It's here we have a vibrant economy. We're going to share it with you. We want what the future of that is. I don't know. So I think that, it's very dangerous. The United States is playing games with Taiwan and Japan that are dangerous, and there are red lines for the Chinese. The Chinese are not going to let any independence movement.
Yeah, it seems like the U.S. more and more is down to using brute force to enforce its will. Like soft power is pretty much vanished. No one looks like people look at China today the way people looked at the U.S. like early 1900s. China is the land of the future. They have high-speed rail, 5G telecommunications. It's interesting.
And what the Chinese have done to develop their own society is absolutely fantastic over the past 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fantastic. And, I'm not totally sanguine about it. I mean, I think they have nuclear power and electrical things. I mean, there are things that I'm sanguine about, and I don't think it's. I would call it real workers' power, but they certainly have done things that developed it that have benefited the working class enormously. Mm-hmm. So, the Chinese just. I have a good friend another friend from high school. And college, we went together, and he's well connected in the Democratic Party.
Okay.
And he was telling me, and he works at a nonprofit in Washington. He was telling me a few months ago, he got a call from this Chinese businessman. And he said, let's have lunch together. I swear to God, I'm telling you this story. I don't know, it's secondhand, but I don't know why he'd make this up. And this Chinese businessman, he had lunch with the businessman and his wife, and had a very nice lunch. The businessman bought him lunch. And this guy, my friend, said to him, so what is this lunch about? And the guy said, well, I know you're well connected in the Democratic Party and you know people in the party. And I just want to tell you something. And this guy wasn't Chinese Communist Party or anything. He was just a Chinese. He said, I want you to give them a message for you. We are going to eat your lunch. I mean, he just said, you mean you brought me here to have this nice lunch in this nice restaurant in DC to tell me? He goes, yeah, I just want to tell you. So you know, unfortunately, I think that the American ruling class and political elite is exactly afraid of that, and they have reason to be.
Yeah, right. Interesting. Yeah. People are saying, like, with Africa, the U.S. has to offer Africa is coups and drone warfare, while China offers trade, infrastructure development.
Exactly.
So interesting. Well, anyway, I want to thank you very much. I'm going to have to go. My two dogs are getting very restless here.
Yeah.
I really enjoy speaking with you.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jim. Bye.
And can I just mention that people can see my work at thepolemicist.net, and I'm on YouTube at @thepolemicist_ and on Facebook at The Polemicist.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you. Well, I meant to ask, is there anything else you'd like to say?
No?
Okay.
Have a nice summer.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.